I stared at the prenuptial agreement on my desk, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead of one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. Even now, 5 years later, the memory of that day makes my hands shake. My name is Solstice, and I'm about to tell you how I turned a cruel prenup into the sweetest revenge. Sign here, dear. Savannah's manicured nail tapped the bottom of page 23. Her voice dripped honey, but her eyes were cold as she watched me from across the mahogany conference table. It's just a formality. All marriages in our circle have them. I remember looking at Titus, searching his face for any sign that he'd stand up for me. He avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by his Rolex watch. I'd like to read it first, I said quietly, pulling the stack of papers closer. Savannah's perfectly lined lips twitched. Of course, but we have dinner reservations at Le Bernardin in an hour. Perhaps you could speed things along? The attorney they'd chosen, a silver-haired man who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a month, cleared his throat. The terms are standard. Mr. Romero's family assets are protected, and any joint assets acquired during the marriage will be split equally. Standard? I echoed, flipping through the pages. It says here I waive all rights to any property, investments, or business interests held by the Romero family. Well, darling, Savannah leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Surely you understand. We've built this legacy over generations. We can't risk temporary ornaments disrupting that. The slap of those words stung worse than if she'd actually struck me. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but kept my voice steady. Temporary ornaments? Mother, Titus finally spoke, but his protest was weak, like everything else about him lately. I'm just being practical, Savannah waved her hand dismissively. After all, Solstice, you're what was it again? An administrative assistant? Executive assistant, I corrected, though it didn't matter. To them, I'd always be the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who somehow caught their golden boy's eye. May I have my own lawyer review this? I asked, knowing the answer before Savannah's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. The wedding is in 3 weeks, she said sharply. We don't have time for unnecessary delays. Either you sign, showing you trust our family, or... The threat hung in the air. I looked at Titus again, but he was examining his cuticles now. 5 years of dating, and he couldn't even meet my eyes. I have one condition, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I want a clause added about independent ventures. The attorney frowned. What kind of ventures? Any business I might start on my own during the marriage. Those remain mine entirely. Savannah actually laughed. Oh, darling, planning to open a little Etsy shop? Something like that, I replied, watching her share an amused look with Titus. The attorney shrugged, probably thinking about his dinner plans. I don't see why not. It's irrelevant to the family's interests. He scribbled something on page 17, then pushed the papers back to me. Initial here and sign on the last page. I read the new clause carefully, memorizing every word while Savannah tapped her expensive heel impatiently. Then I signed. Welcome to the family, Savannah said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Now, about the wedding, I've taken the liberty of revising your choice of flowers. Peonies are so common. I nodded, already distant, thinking about the small jewelry-making kit hidden in my apartment closet, the one Titus had mockingly called my cute little hobby last month. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, I read through the entire prenup again. Savannah had been so focused on protecting their fortune, so convinced of my insignificance, that she'd handed me the perfect weapon without even knowing it. They shouldn't have underestimated me, I whispered to the empty room, carefully folding the papers and sliding them into my desk drawer. My phone buzzed, a text from Bailey. How'd it go with the dragons? I typed back. They think they've caged me, but they forgot to check if I had wings. Bailey's response was immediate. Girl, you're scaring me. What are you planning? I smiled in the darkness, thinking about the business plan I'd been quietly developing, the online courses I'd been taking in secret. "Just wait and see," I replied. "Just wait and see." The wedding was in 3 weeks. The revenge would take longer. But that was okay. I've always been good at playing the long game. "Oh, how quaint," Savannah's voice carried across the expansive living room as she examined my crafting table. "Titus, darling, perhaps we could move this little setup to the basement? It doesn't quite match the aesthetic we discussed." I kept arranging my beads, pretending not to hear. It had been 8 months since the wedding, and Sunday family dinners had become an Olympic sport in passive-aggressive commentary. "Actually, Mother," Titus said, barely looking up from his phone, "the basement floods sometimes. Wouldn't want to risk damaging your, what are those again, honey?" "Semi-precious stones," I replied, carefully wrapping rose quartz in copper wire. "This piece is for—" "Speaking of precious things," Denise cut in, swirling her wine glass, "did you see Caroline's daughter just landed a junior executive position at Goldman? 26 years old. Some people just have that drive." I bit my tongue, continuing my work. My phone buzzed quietly, a notification from my Etsy shop, another sale. "Solstice," Savannah called from the kitchen. "Be a dear and help with the plates. That's more your expertise, isn't it?" I carefully set down my tools and went to help, catching Bailey's eye as she followed me. She'd insisted on coming to these dinners lately, claiming moral support, but I knew she was really there to keep me from snapping. "Did you see the order that just came in?" Bailey whispered as we gathered plates. "That's your 3rd sale today." "4th," I corrected quietly. "Someone bought the moonstone pendant this morning." "Ladies," Savannah appeared behind us, making me jump. "Less chattering, more serving. Denise is telling us about her charity gala." Back in the dining room, Denise was holding court. "Of course, we're expecting at least 200 guests. Very exclusive. Solstice, dear, we'll need help with the coat check." "Actually," I said, setting down the plates, "I'm busy that weekend. I have a craft fair." The silence that followed was deafening until Savannah broke it with a laugh. "Oh, darling, this isn't some little church bazaar you can skip. This is a Romero family event." "I've already paid for my booth," I said firmly, "and I have orders to fulfill." "Orders?" Titus finally looked up from his phone. "You're actually selling those things?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Then again, and again. Bailey grabbed it before I could, her eyes widening. "Sol, you need to see this." I excused myself to the kitchen, ignoring Savannah's disapproving click of the tongue. When I saw my screen, my hands started shaking. "Some influencer just shared your shop," Bailey whispered excitedly. "You've got 37 orders in the last 5 minutes. "Impossible," I breathed, scrolling through the notifications. But there they were, order after order, messages asking about custom pieces, wholesale inquiries. "Everything all right in here?" Titus appeared in the doorway, looking annoyed. "Mother's about to serve the main course." "Everything's perfect," I said, quickly putting my phone away. "Just perfect." Later that night, after everyone had left and Titus had retreated to his home office, I sat at my crafting table calculating numbers. With these new orders, I'd make more this month than my administrative job paid. My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Saw your pieces on Instagram. We're a boutique in LA interested in stocking your line. Please call to discuss." I stared at the message, heart pounding. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the business plan I'd been refining for months. "Still playing with your beads?" Titus appeared behind me, making me quickly close the laptop. "You know, if you need spending money, you could just ask." I thought about the separate bank account I'd opened last month, already holding a comfortable cushion from my online sales. "I'm good, thanks." "Well, don't stay up too late," he yawned. "Mother's expecting us for brunch tomorrow. She wants to discuss your wardrobe choices for the gala." After he left, I reopened my laptop and typed a quick email to Yosef, the quiet attorney I'd been consulting. Ready to move forward with the LLC registration. Let's meet Tuesday. Bailey texted, "You okay after tonight?" I smiled, looking at my crafting table, my launching pad disguised as a hobby. Better than okay. Remember what I said about wings? Yeah? They're getting stronger every day. I picked up the rose quartz piece I'd been working on earlier, now completed. It would sell for $300, not that the Romeros would ever bother to check my prices. They were too busy planning galas and judging my little hobby to notice I was building an empire right under their noses. Their biggest mistake wasn't making me sign that prenup. It was believing I'd stay in the cage they built for me. LLC registration complete, Yosef said, sliding the documents across his desk. Congratulations on officially becoming a business owner. I traced my fingers over the company name, Solstice Designs. Simple, elegant, mine. The separate bank account is set up? He asked, adjusting his glasses. Yes, and I've been documenting everything. Every penny earned, every supply purchased. Good, he leaned forward. Remember what we discussed. Keep your personal and business finances completely separate. And Titus doesn't need to know yet, I finished. As per the prenup clause we added. My phone buzzed. Another wholesale inquiry. They were coming daily now. I need a marketing person, I said, more to myself than Yosef. Someone who understands social media, scaling. Actually, he reached for a business card. I might know someone. That's how I met Layla. She walked into the coffee shop the next day like she owned it, designer laptop under one arm, portfolio in hand. I've been following your brand, she said, sitting down. Your aesthetic is incredible, but you're only reaching about 10% of your potential market. I sipped my coffee, studying her. And you can help with that? I can help you build an empire. She opened her laptop, turning it to show me a presentation. But first, we need to talk about your pricing strategy. You're selling yourself short. 2 hours later, I had a marketing director and a whole new vision for my company. Layla didn't just understand social media. She understood luxury branding, influencer partnerships, and most importantly, she understood me. Why are you working so late? Titus asked that evening, finding me at my crafting table. Just finishing some orders, I said, not mentioning the meeting I'd had with Layla or the 5-figure purchase order from a high-end boutique. Mother says you've been missing family dinners. I've been busy. He sighed, that condescending sound I'd grown to hate. With your little jewelry thing? Come on, Solstice. You need to prioritize. I thought about the warehouse space Layla and I had looked at earlier, about the 3 artisans I just hired to help with production. You're right. I do need to prioritize. The next few months passed in a blur of growth. My dining room table became command central, covered in shipping labels and order forms when the Romeros weren't visiting. Layla's marketing strategy was working better than we'd imagined. Look at this, Bailey said one morning, holding up her phone. A major fashion magazine had featured one of my necklaces in their must-have accessories spread. They didn't mention it was yours, she added. Good, I replied, packaging another order. Let's keep it that way. Later that week, during another mandatory family dinner, Denise was flipping through that same magazine. Oh, look at these pieces, she said, showing Savannah. This is what real jewelry looks like, Solstice, not that craft fair stuff you make. I caught Bailey's eye across the table, and we both had to hide our smiles. The craft fair stuff had just been picked up by 3 luxury department stores. Speaking of which, Savannah set down her fork. We hardly see you at family functions anymore, always busy with your little hobby. It keeps me occupied, I said mildly, thinking of the business meeting I had tomorrow with potential investors. Well, Denise smirked, at least she's not asking Titus for shopping money anymore. If they only knew that my last month's revenue could buy their entire dinner service set 10 times over. My phone buzzed. Layla had sent a message. The magazine wants to do a feature, full interview, brand spotlight. Should I set it up? Everything okay? Titus asked, noticing my expression. Perfect, I replied, typing back to Layla. Book it, but keep my name out of it. Use the brand only. That night, after another successful day of sales, I sat in my home office reviewing the numbers. The business had grown beyond my wildest expectations, but I kept playing small at home. Let them think I was just a housewife with a hobby. Let them underestimate me. My phone lit up with a text from Bailey. Did you see? Denise shared your magazine feature on Instagram. She has no idea it's your company. I laughed softly, thinking about the irony. The Romeros had spent years looking down on me, and now they were unknowingly promoting my brand to their social circles. Just wait, I texted back. The best part is yet to come, because while they were busy mocking my little hobby, I was building something they couldn't touch, something protected by their own precious prenup. And soon, very soon, they'd realize just how badly they'd underestimated the temporary ornament they'd welcomed into their family. Is that a Chanel bag? Titus asked one morning, eyeing my new accessory as I rushed to leave for a craft fair. Oh, this? I adjusted the strap, remembering when similar bags used to intimidate me at family gatherings. Just a good replica. He frowned, taking a closer look. It looks authentic. I'm late for my meeting, I said, quickly correcting myself. The craft fair. You're going to a craft fair dressed like that? He gestured to my designer outfit, another recent purchase I'd explained away as good deals from outlet stores. Some of us like to look professional, Titus. I grabbed my keys, but he blocked the doorway. What's really going on, Solstice? These clothes, the late nights, all these meetings? Nothing's going on, I said smoothly. My hobby's doing well, that's all. How well? I thought about the warehouse I'd just leased, the 30 employees now on payroll, the upcoming collaboration with a major department store. Well enough. His eyes narrowed. Show me the books. Excuse me? The financial records for your little jewelry business. He crossed his arms. If it's doing so well, you won't mind sharing the numbers with your husband. I felt a familiar surge of anger, but kept my voice level. Actually, I do mind. My business is separate from our marriage. Remember the prenup? The prenup? He laughed. That was about my family's assets, not your craft project. My phone buzzed. Layla was waiting at the office. Yes, we had an actual office now, not that Titus knew that. We can discuss this later, I said, stepping around him. I have to go. To another mysterious meeting? He grabbed my arm. What are you hiding? I pulled away, my patience wearing thin. Don't ever grab me like that again. His face reddened. I want to see the financial records. Tonight. No. I opened the door. And if you ever touch me like that again, you'll regret it. At the office, Layla could tell something was wrong. Trouble in paradise? He's getting suspicious, I said, reviewing the latest sales reports. The success is getting harder to hide. Maybe it's time to stop hiding, she suggested, pulling up our social media metrics. We're trending again. The new home decor line is exploding. I shook my head. Not yet. Everything has to be perfect first. Speaking of perfect, she grinned, wait until you see who wants to collaborate with us. She turned her laptop to show me an email from one of the biggest luxury retailers in the country. The numbers made my head spin. Holy, I whispered. Still want to keep playing small? Layla raised an eyebrow. That evening I returned home to find Titus in his office, surrounded by papers. The prenup was open on his desk. Had your lawyer look it over? I asked, recognizing the document. He looked up, startled. How did you, know? Because I've been 10 steps ahead of you since the day your mother made me sign that paper. What's that supposed to mean? My phone buzzed again. Another notification about our viral home collection. It means you should have read the fine print. Later that night, I called Bailey. It's starting, I told her. He's digging into the prenup. Are you ready? She asked. I looked at my laptop screen, at the 8-figure revenue projections for the next quarter. More than ready. Solstice? Titus called from downstairs. There's something weird in this contract about independent ventures? I smiled, remembering Savannah's dismissive laugh when I'd requested that clause. Coming, dear. I found him frowning at the document. This says any business you start during the marriage remains solely yours? That's right. But, he looked confused. Your jewelry thing, it's just a hobby, right? I pulled out my phone and pulled up the Solstice Designs website, the one he'd never bothered to look at, the one featuring our nationwide locations, press coverage, and celebrity collaborations. Why don't you see for yourself? I handed him the phone. His face went pale as he scrolled, taking in the empire I'd built right under his nose. This is impossible. No, I corrected him. This is what happens when you underestimate someone. He grabbed the prenup again, reading frantically. But our lawyers, they checked everything. They checked what they thought was important, I said, turning to leave. They protected your family's money, but they never thought to protect you from me. I paused at the door. Oh, and Titus, you might want to call your mother. I have a feeling she'll want to review that prenup herself. Mrs. Romero, please have a seat. John Wells, Titus's lawyer, gestured to the chair across from his mahogany desk. His smile was strained, professional worry lines creasing his forehead. Actually, I said, setting down my Hermes bag, authentic this time. I'll stand. This won't take long. He cleared his throat. We've reviewed your company's financials. Impressive growth. But surely you understand that as Titus's wife. Let me stop you right there. I pulled out my own copy of the prenup, the one I'd kept safely stored all these years. Page 17, paragraph 3. Would you like to read it aloud? His eyes skimmed the page, and I watched the color drain from his face. The door burst open, and Savannah stormed in, Titus trailing behind her. This is absurd, she announced, her tennis bracelet jangling as she waved her arms. That clause was meant for craft fairs and bake sales, not a multi-million-dollar company, I finished for her. Funny how things work out. You manipulated us, Titus said, his voice shaking. You planned this from the start. I turned to face him. No, you handed me this opportunity. All of you did. Every time you mocked my little hobby, every time you treated me like I was beneath you. We'll fight this, Savannah declared. We have the best lawyers in Manhattan. By all means, I smiled, fight it. But first let me remind you who wrote this prenup. Your lawyers, your terms, your words. John cleared his throat again. Mrs. Romero, Savannah, she's right. The clause is ironclad. Any independent business venture started during the marriage remains solely her property. That's impossible, Savannah slammed her hand on the desk. Show me the company registration dates. I nodded to Yosef, who had been quietly observing from the corner. He opened his briefcase and produced a stack of documents. Solstice Designs, LLC, he read. Registered 6 months after the wedding. All paperwork filed correctly, all taxes paid, all profits kept strictly separate from joint accounts. But the money, Titus interrupted. She used our money to start it. Actually, I pulled out my original bank statements. I used the proceeds from my first few Etsy sales. Remember those? The ones you laughed at during family dinner? Savannah sank into a chair, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. How much? She whispered. How much is the company worth? I exchanged glances with Yosef, who nodded. Our latest valuation puts Solstice Designs at $15 million. Conservative estimate. The silence in the room was deafening. That's... Titus stumbled over his words. That's more than our family's entire... Annual income, I finished. Yes, I know. I've seen your tax returns. Perks of being the little wife who handles the paperwork. You can't do this to us. Savannah stood up, her voice rising. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was I family when you called me a temporary ornament? When you made me work coat check at your galas? When you treated me like a charity case for 5 years? I want a divorce, Titus announced suddenly. Finally, I said, something we agree on. John shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. There's nothing to discuss, I cut in. The prenup is clear. Titus gets what he came with. I keep what I built. While using our name, Savannah protested. The Romero connection. Check your facts, I interrupted. I never once used your precious name. Every bit of press, every collaboration, every sale was under Solstice Designs. You were too busy looking down your noses to notice. My phone buzzed. Layla was texting about another major deal. I checked the time. Now, if we're done here, I have a company to run. This isn't over, Savannah hissed as I reached the door. I turned back one last time. You're right. It's not over. The divorce proceedings will start next week. But this? I gestured to the prenup on the desk. This ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for your family. As I walked out, I heard Titus ask in a broken voice, Mother, what have we done? In the elevator, I texted Bailey, It's done. They know everything. Her response was immediate. How does it feel? I thought about the years of subtle degradation, the sideways glances, the condescending comments. Then I thought about my growing empire, built piece by piece while they weren't watching. It feels, I typed back, exactly like karma. The mediation room felt smaller than I remembered, despite its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The Romeros sat across the table, dressed like they were heading to a corporate takeover rather than a divorce settlement. Let's begin, the mediator said, shuffling her papers. We're here to discuss asset division in the dissolution of... We'll take 50% of Solstice Designs, Savannah interrupted, her voice sharp. That's more than fair, considering the company was built during the marriage. I glanced at Layla, who gave me a subtle nod. She pulled out a leather portfolio and began distributing documents. Before we continue, Layla said, I'd like to present our latest valuation report. As CEO of Solstice Designs, I believe these numbers will help inform the discussion. CEO? Titus sputtered. Since when? Since your wife brilliantly appointed me 6 months ago, Layla smiled, though I've been the marketing director for nearly 2 years. The mediator reviewed the documents, her eyebrows rising. These numbers are substantial. 23 million, I said quietly. That's our current valuation, up from 15 million last quarter. Savannah grabbed the papers, her hands shaking. This is impossible. You make jewelry, little trinkets, and... Actually, Layla interrupted, pulling up a presentation on the room screen. Solstice Designs has expanded into home decor, luxury accessories, and we've just launched our first flagship store in Soho. Perhaps you've seen it. The opening made quite a splash in Vogue. Titus loosened his tie, looking pale. But the prenup... Yes, I leaned forward. Let's talk about the prenup. The one your mother was so insistent on. The one that specifically protected any independent business ventures I started during our marriage. Our lawyers have reviewed everything, Yosef added, speaking for the first time. The company was founded with separate funds, maintained separately, and falls squarely within the prenup's protection clause. This is theft! Savannah stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You've stolen our family's good name. Show me once, I challenged, where I used the Romero name. Show me one advertisement, one product label, one press release. Silence filled the room. You can't, I continued, because I never did. Every success, every milestone, every dollar earned was under my name alone. The mediator cleared her throat. Given the prenuptial agreement and the documentation provided, Solstice Designs is clearly separate property. It's not subject to division in the divorce. Then what do I get? Titus asked, his voice small. Layla pulled out another document. According to our records, you get the furniture you brought into the marriage, your personal belongings, and... She paused for effect. The credit card debt you've accumulated at your private club. This is outrageous, Savannah snapped. We'll appeal. We'll... You'll what? I stood up slowly. Expose how you forced a prenup on me? How you treated me like dirt for 5 years? How you never bothered to notice I was building an empire right under your noses? You tricked us, Titus accused. No, I corrected him. I outplayed you. There's a difference. The mediator shuffled her papers again. If there are no other assets to discuss. Actually, I reached into my bag. There is one more thing. I pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table to Savannah. Your prenup, the original copy. I thought you might want it as a souvenir. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Why are you doing this? Because you wrote this script, Savannah. You were so worried about protecting your family's wealth that you never considered I might create my own. I'd like to make a counteroffer. Titus tried one last time. There will be no counteroffers, Yosef stated firmly. The terms are clear, and they're non-negotiable. I gathered my things, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. You know what the funniest part is? I said, pausing at the door. If you had treated me with an ounce of respect, I might have shared my success with you. But you made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for your family. And now? Savannah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now you're not good enough for mine. As we walked out, Layla squeezed my arm. That was better than any revenge fantasy I've ever had. It's not about revenge, I said, watching the Romeros through the glass walls, huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. It's about justice and karma. My phone buzzed. Another notification about our soaring stock price. I smiled, thinking about how fitting it was that their precious prenup had become the very thing that brought them down. Ready to go? Layla asked. We have that meeting with the European distributors. I took one last look at my soon-to-be ex-family. More than ready. Let's build something even bigger. Have you seen this? Bailey tossed a magazine onto my desk. The cover showed me and Layla at our Soho store opening, surrounded by A-list celebrities wearing Solstice Designs pieces. From craft table to empire, how Solstice Designs became fashion's fastest-growing luxury brand. I read the headline aloud. The timing couldn't be better, Bailey grinned. The divorce was finalized yesterday, right? I nodded, spinning my now empty ring finger. Titus moved out last week, into a one-bedroom condo in Jersey. How the mighty have fallen, Bailey said, scrolling through her phone. Oh my God, speaking of falling, have you seen Savannah's latest Instagram post? She held up her phone, showing me a photo of Savannah at some charity event. The caption read, "Sometimes life's greatest lessons come from unexpected places. Humbled grow new beginnings." Humbled is right, I said. Their country club membership got revoked after Titus couldn't pay the dues. My office phone buzzed. Ms. Pearson, Denise is here to see you. I exchanged looks with Bailey. Send her in. Denise walked in wearing last season's Prada, looking decidedly less polished than usual. Solstice, this is a beautiful office. What do you want, Denise? She fidgeted with her handbag. I always knew you had potential. Even back then, I told Mother. No, I cut her off. You mocked me. You all did. Don't try to rewrite history now. We were wrong, she said quietly. I was wrong, and I thought maybe, given our history, you want a job, I realized. That's why you're here. She straightened up. I have connections. I know people, the same people who won't return your calls now that the Romero fortune is drying up. Her face fell. That's not fair. Neither was making me check coats at your galas, I replied. Neither was calling my work cute little crafts for 5 years. People change, she insisted. Yes, they do, but usually only when they're forced to. I stood up. I'm not interested in your connections, Denise. I built this company while you were busy looking down on me. Mother was right, she snapped, mask finally cracking. You planned this from the start. No, I corrected her. I survived your family's cruelty, and I turned it into fuel. There's a difference. After she stormed out, Bailey whistled low. That felt good to watch. My phone buzzed with a text from Titus. I need to talk. I messed up. Speaking of messing up, I showed Bailey the message. Are you going to respond? Before I could answer, my assistant rushed in. Ms. Pearson, the Times wants to do a feature. They're calling you the Queen of Quiet Success. I laughed at the irony. There was nothing quiet about my success anymore. The story had gone viral, the underestimated wife who turned a prenup into a weapon of karmic justice. Also, she added, Vogue wants you for their Women in Power issue. Book them both, I said. It's time to tell my story. Later that evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Layla in the elevator. Did you see? She asked, showing me her tablet. Our stock price doubled after the divorce news broke. Apparently, people love a good revenge success story. It wasn't about revenge, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Tell that to Titus, she smirked. I heard he's been showing up at our retailers, trying to claim he's part of the company. How embarrassing for him. Almost as embarrassing as Savannah getting caught trying to return fake Solstice Designs pieces to our flagship store. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, where a group of young women was waiting for their interview slots. Each one clutched a portfolio, eyes bright with ambition. Remember when that was you? Layla asked softly. Except you didn't have anyone holding the door open. I watched the aspiring designers, thinking about how different my life had become. No, I had people trying to slam it in my face. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Titus. Please, I miss you. This time I replied, what you mistook for weakness was strategy. What you called a hobby became an empire. What you tried to control set me free. Then I blocked his number. Ready for tomorrow's board meeting? Layla asked as we walked out. I smiled, thinking about the expansion plans we'd be announcing. More than ready. After all, success is the best revenge. And karma? She raised an eyebrow. Karma, I said, watching my driver pull up in my new Mercedes, is just getting started. And that's why I'm here today, I said into the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces in the conference hall. To tell you that success isn't about revenge, it's about resilience. The audience of young entrepreneurs hung on every word. In the front row, I spotted Bailey wiping away tears and Layla nodding proudly. When they handed me that prenup, I continued, they thought they were protecting their wealth. Instead, they gave me the blueprint for my freedom. A hand shot up during the Q&A. Did you ever confront your ex-mother-in-law about how she treated you? Actually, I smiled, she confronted me last week, right here in this hotel. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for details. I was checking in for this conference when I heard her voice behind me. Solstice, she said. We need to talk. I paused, remembering the moment. Savannah looked different, smaller somehow. She'd sold her designer wardrobe, I'd heard, to cover legal fees after Titus's failed lawsuit. What did she want? Someone called out. To apologize? To negotiate? To beg? I shook my head. It didn't matter. I simply turned to her and said, No, Savannah, we don't need to talk. You had 5 years to talk to me, to see me, to treat me like a human being. That time is over. Murmurs rippled through the audience. She tried to follow me to the elevator, saying something about family and forgiveness. I stopped her with one question. Did you know I miscarried during our 2nd year of marriage? The room went silent. No, she said. Titus never told me. And I replied, I told him. I told all of you at a family dinner, but you were too busy discussing Denise's new yacht to hear me. I took a sip of water, letting the weight of that sink in. That's when I realized their cruelty had given me a gift. It taught me that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Another hand. What about your ex-husband? Does he regret his choices? Titus sends me letters sometimes, I admitted. Each one starts with "I'm sorry" and ends with a business proposal. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But here's what I want you all to understand. I leaned into the microphone. This isn't a story about getting even. It's about getting ahead. While they were busy protecting their legacy, I was building mine. In the back of the room, I spotted a familiar face, Yosef, my attorney, who'd believed in my vision from the start. The prenup they forced me to sign had one clause they overlooked, but the real oversight? They overlooked me. And that's the lesson I want you to take home today. Don't overreact, outgrow, outbuild, outlast. The applause was deafening. Afterward, in the green room, Bailey hugged me tight. That was incredible, but you didn't tell them about the foundation. Some things, I smiled, are better shown than told. Layla walked in with her tablet. The Solstice Foundation website just went live. First-generation college scholarships, small business grants for women entrepreneurs. And? I asked. And, she grinned. The first grant recipient is the daughter of your old admin assistant, the one Savannah said would never amount to anything. My phone buzzed, a news alert. The Romeros were selling their mansion. The photo showed a "for sale" sign in front of those imposing gates that had once intimidated me. Should we buy it? Layla joked. Turn it into a business incubator for women entrepreneurs? Actually, I said, that's exactly what we're going to do. Bailey's eyes widened. You're not serious. Dead serious. Let's transform their symbol of exclusion into a space of opportunity. Now that, Layla said, is karma. As we left the conference hall, a young woman stopped me. Ms. Pearson, your story changed my life. I was about to give up on my startup, but now... I touched her arm. Never let anyone else write your story, and never, ever sign anything without reading the fine print. She laughed, then grew serious. One more question? Do you regret any of it? I thought about the crafting table where it all began, now displayed in our company museum. About the prenup that became my ladder instead of my cage. About the family that tried to break me but made me unbreakable instead. No, I said finally. I don't regret a single moment, because every slight, every dismissal, every cruel word, they all became building blocks. And look what I built. We stepped outside, where my driver waited beside the car. The sun caught the Solstice Designs logo on the side, a rising sun breaking through clouds. Ready to go? Layla asked. I looked back at the conference center, where hundreds of women were leaving with new dreams and determination in their eyes. Ready, I said. We have an empire to run.
I'm Emma Jean, and I learned early in life that appearances can be deceiving. Growing up in a modest apartment above my parents' small grocery store, I watched them work tirelessly, saving every penny they could. What our neighbors didn't know was that my parents were silent investors in several successful tech startups, teaching me that true wealth doesn't need to announce itself. Remember, Emma, my father would say while counting the day's earnings. Money talks, but wealth whispers. I took those words to heart, excelling in finance and economics while working part-time at our store. By 25, I had my MBA and had quietly built my own investment portfolio worth millions. But I kept my success private, preferring to be underestimated rather than invade. That's how I met Michael. It was a rainy Tuesday at the local coffee shop where I often worked on my laptop, managing my investments while appearing to be just another young professional. Michael rushed in, drenched and frantically checking his watch. The register's card reader is down, the barista announced apologetically. Michael patted his pockets, realizing he'd left his wallet at home. I noticed his expensive but worn briefcase, a gift from someone special, perhaps, and his kind eyes. I've got it, I said, stepping up to pay. Oh no, I couldn't. He started to protest. Consider it karma, I smiled. Maybe you can return the favor someday. That favor came in the form of dinner the following week. Michael was charming, genuine, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a middle manager at Preston Financial, one of the city's largest investment firms. It's not the most exciting job, he admitted over pasta, but it's stable. I liked that he wasn't trying to impress me with false bravado. Stability is underrated, I replied, thinking of my own carefully managed portfolio. What I didn't mention was that I already owned a significant number of shares in Preston Financial. I've been watching the company for months, noting its potential and its problems. The current management was old school, resistant to necessary technological updates that could streamline their operations. Our relationship blossomed naturally. Michael was kind, honest, and treated everyone with respect, from CEO to janitor. After a year of dating, he proposed with his grandmother's ring. It's not much, he said nervously, but it's been in the family for generations. It's perfect, I assured him, meaning it. The ring's value wasn't in its modest diamond, but in its history of love. Then I met his family, and everything changed. Michael's sister, Catherine, worked as a senior analyst at Preston Financial. She'd fast-tracked her way up through office politics and family connections. From our first meeting, she made it clear she found me lacking. "So, what do you do?" she asked during our first family dinner, wine glass dangling from manicured fingers. "I'm a secretary at Rivera Corp," I said, using my cover job. I did actually work there part-time, mainly to maintain my understanding of day-to-day operations in the finance world. Oh, Catherine exchanged looks with their mother, Eleanor. How quaint. Michael always did have a soft spot for charity cases. Michael shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. That silence would become a pattern. After we married, Catherine's disdain grew more obvious. She worked at the same Preston Financial branch as Michael, and her comments became more frequent and cutting. "You know," she told Michael loudly at the office Christmas party, "Sandra from accounting is single now. She's a junior partner, Michael. Much more suitable." I maintained my composure, but Michael's lack of defense stung. He wanted to avoid conflict, he said later. Keep the peace. What they didn't know was that I'd been steadily increasing my stake in Preston Financial. The company needed modernization, and I was positioning myself to make it happen. My cover as a part-time secretary at Rivera Corp allowed me to observe without suspicion. Then came the merger announcement. Preston Financial was joining forces with Rivera Corp, where I supposedly worked as a secretary. The move would double the company's market share, if it succeeded. Catherine was ecstatic, seeing an opportunity for advancement. Finally, a chance to show the board what real talent looks like, she bragged at family dinner. Unlike some people who can barely manage a filing cabinet. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, nodded approvingly. It's important to have ambition, dear. Not everyone is content with mediocrity. Her eyes flickered to me. Michael studied his plate. What they didn't know was that I'd orchestrated the merger through shell companies and careful negotiations. I owned 40% of Rivera Corp, soon to be 40% of the merged Preston Rivera Financial Group. The annual company gala would announce the merger's completion. Catherine insisted on having it at her country club, making sure I knew the usual membership fee. But don't worry, she smiled sweetly, staff can use the service entrance. The night of the gala arrived. I wore a simple black dress, expensive but understated. Catherine sashayed around in designer silk, introducing Michael to more appropriate women. "Oh, Emma," she called out loudly as I stood alone near the appetizers. The catering staff needed help in the kitchen. I told them you feel right at home there. Laughter rippled through her circle of sycophants. Michael, across the room, pretended to be engrossed in conversation. That's when Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Rivera Corp, walked in. He spotted me immediately. "Mrs. John," he called out warmly. "The woman of the hour." Catherine frowned. "Excuse me?" Mr. Harrison continued, "Everyone, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Financial Officer and major shareholder, Emma Jean. Without her vision for this merger, none of us would be here tonight." The room fell silent. Catherine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "That's impossible," she stammered. "She's a secretary." "Oh, I did work at Rivera Corp," I said calmly. "Best way to understand a company is from the ground up. But I've also been one of the largest shareholders in both Preston Financial and Rivera Corp for the past 3 years." Eleanor's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. But the country club membership. "I've been a member for 5 years, I replied. "I'm on the board, actually. Interesting that we never ran into each other, Catherine." Michael pushed through the crowd, his face a mix of shock and something else. Shame, perhaps. "Emma," he started. Why didn't you tell me? I met his gaze steadily. Would it have changed anything? Would you have finally stood up to them? Before he could answer, Catherine found her voice. This is ridiculous. I've worked here for 8 years. I've earned my position. About that, Mr. Harrison interjected. Mrs. Zhang has brought some concerning documents to our attention. Something about unauthorized trades under client accounts. Catherine's face went from red to white in an instant. We'll need to discuss this in detail on Monday, he continued. For now, I suggest you enjoy what might be your last company event. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of shocked faces and hasty congratulations. Eleanor and Catherine left early, claiming headaches. Michael kept trying to catch my eye, but I was busy with actual business discussions. Back at home, the silence was deafening. All this time, Michael finally said, "You let them treat you like that." Why? Because I needed to see who people really were, I replied. Money changes how people treat you. I wanted to know if I could count on you to stand by me regardless of my bank account. And did I pass that test? He asked quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. What do you think? The next morning, I headed to my new office early. The weekend security guard did a double take at my upgraded access badge. I was no longer entering through the side entrance as a visiting secretary. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since last night. Dozens of missed calls from Eleanor and Catherine, plus several texts from Michael. Please come home. We need to talk. I know I messed up. Give me a chance to explain. Emma, I love you. Don't throw away our marriage over this. But I had work to do. The audit team had already gathered in the conference room, armed with the evidence I'd been collecting for months. Mrs. Zhang, Mr. Harrison greeted me. Shall we begin? The evidence against Catherine was damning. She'd been running a sophisticated scheme, making unauthorized trades using client funds, skimming profits, and covering her tracks through manipulated records. The amounts were staggering, over $5 million diverted over 3 years. The clients never noticed because she was careful to target dormant accounts, the head auditor explained. Mostly elderly investors who didn't check their statements regularly. My stomach turned. Elderly investors. A quick check confirmed my suspicion. One of the affected accounts belonged to Michael's grandmother, the same one whose ring I wore. Catherine had stolen nearly $200,000 from her own grandmother's retirement fund. As we reviewed the documents, my assistant interrupted. Mrs. Zhang, your mother-in-law is in the lobby. She's causing quite a scene. I sighed, sent her up. Eleanor burst into the conference room, designer handbag swinging wildly. How dare you? You manipulative. Scheming. Mrs. Kennedy, Mr. Harrison cut in sharply. This is a private meeting. Private? Nothing's private anymore, thanks to this gold digger. Do you know what she's done to our family? I met her gaze calmly. Do you know what your daughter has done to your mother-in-law's retirement fund? That stopped her cold. What? I slid the account statement across the table. Eleanor's face paled as she read the numbers. This must be a mistake, she whispered. No mistake, I replied. Catherine stole from her own grandmother and dozens of other retirees. Eleanor sank into a chair, her righteous anger deflating. But she said she was doing so well at work. She was, at fraud. I stood up. The police will be here within the hour. I suggest you get Catherine a good lawyer. As if on cue, Catherine burst into the room, Michael trailing behind her. You can't do this, she shrieked. I've worked to do hard. Save it for the police, Mr. Harrison interrupted. They're very interested in your creative accounting. Michael stepped forward. Emma, please. There must be another way. She's my sister. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. And I'm your wife. Or did you forget that every time she humiliated me? I didn't know about any of this. He gestured helplessly at the documents. You didn't want to know, I corrected. Just like you didn't want to see how they treated me. It was easier to stay quiet, wasn't it? Catherine's face had taken on a calculating look. I have dirt on other people too. If I go down. Save your threats. I cut her off. Every trade, every transfer, every doctored document has been traced. Your dirt won't save you from prison. Eleanor began to cry. Think of our family name. Like you thought of your mother's retirement? I asked quietly. She trusted you with her account, Catherine. They all did. The police arrived minutes later. As they led Catherine away in handcuffs, She turned to Michael one last time. Are you really going to let her destroy our family? Michael stood frozen, torn between family loyalty and moral obligation. In that moment, I made my decision. Send the divorce papers to my lawyer, I told him. I'll have my things out by tonight. Emma, wait. He caught my arm. I know I failed you. But please, give me a chance to make it right. I gently removed his hand. You had 3 years of chances. Every time they belittled me, every time they treated me like dirt. Those were chances to stand up for your wife. You chose your side long ago. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Catherine pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and theft. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison in order to repay millions in restitution. Eleanor and Michael's father had to sell their country club membership and downsize their home to help cover Catherine's legal fees. I threw myself into transforming Preston Rivera Financial. We implemented stricter oversight measures, modernized our technology, and established a restitution fund for Catherine's victims. Michael's grandmother was the first to receive full compensation. Months passed. I granted Michael an amicable divorce, even letting him keep the apartment. Some called me too generous, but I remembered the kind man who'd forgotten his wallet that rainy day. He wasn't a bad person, just a weak one. One evening, as I worked late in my office, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Michael's grandmother. She walked in slowly, leaning on her cane, my former engagement ring glinting on her thin finger. Michael had returned it to her after our divorce. I owe you a visit, she said, settling into a chair, to thank you for protecting my retirement and to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. Oh, but I do. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was the engagement ring. I want you to keep this. I couldn't possibly. You protected not just my savings, but my dignity. That's worth more than any ring. She smiled sadly. Besides, you were always more of a granddaughter to me than Catherine. After she left, I stood at my office window, watching the city lights flicker on. The ring sat on my desk, a reminder that true worth isn't in what we own, but in what we stand for. Eleanor still tries to contact me occasionally, usually when she needs money. Catherine writes from prison, alternating between threats and pleas for help with her appeal. I forward all communication to my lawyers. Michael sent me one final email. I finally understand what real strength looks like. It's not in keeping the peace, but in standing up for what's right. I'm sorry I learned that lesson too late. Take care of yourself, Emma. I did keep the ring, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained: self-respect, clarity, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest wealth lies in being true to yourself. Last week, I approved a new financial literacy program for seniors, free workshops to help them protect their investments. We named it after Michael's grandmother. It felt right, turning past pain into future protection. The morning sun streams through my office window as I review the latest merger proposals. My father's words echo in my mind. Money talks, but wealth whispers. He was right, but he forgot one thing: integrity roars. And that's a sound that even the highest walls of privilege can't silence. I've always believed that true character reveals itself in how people treat those they think can't benefit them. My name is Emma Miller, and this is how I learned just how right that belief was. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and humility. My father was a janitor at a prestigious tech company, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They worked themselves to the bone to give me an education, often going without so I could have what I needed. Emma, sweetheart, my mother would say, her hands rough from years of scrubbing, knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. Those words echoed in my mind as I worked my way through college, studying finance and computer science. By day, I attended classes. By night, I cleaned offices just like my father. But I had a secret that kept me going. I was developing a revolutionary financial algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. During my final year, while most students were partying, I was perfecting my program. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. My algorithm caught the attention of a major investment firm. They offered me $75 million for it, plus a position on their board. I accepted the deal but kept my wealth hidden. I continued living modestly, investing wisely, and growing my fortune quietly. That's when I met James. He literally ran into me at a small cafe where I was working on my laptop. Hot coffee splashed across the table, barely missing my computer. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins. His genuine distress made me laugh. "It's okay," I assured him, helping to clean up. "I'm Emma." "James, please let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do." One coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to more. James was kind, funny, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a high school teacher, passionate about making a difference in his students' lives. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then I met his family. Patricia, my mother-in-law, lived in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood. Her husband, Robert, had passed away years ago, leaving her a comfortable inheritance. From our first meeting, she made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her son. "A cleaner's daughter," she said, eyeing me over her wine glass. "How quaint. James, darling, I thought you were dating that lovely doctor's daughter, Caroline." "Mom," James warned, but the tone was set. At every family gathering, Patricia found ways to remind me of my place. She'd ask me to help the catering staff, claiming I feel more comfortable in the kitchen. When James defended me, she'd laugh it off as just trying to make Emma feel at home. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Amanda, was cut from the same cloth. A successful real estate agent, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her success or remind me of my humble beginnings. "Emma, dear," she'd say with false sweetness, "I have some clients looking for a cleaning service. Should I give them your mother's number?" I took it all in stride, partly because I knew the truth about my wealth, but mostly because I wanted to see people's true colors. James would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering apologies for his family's behavior, but never truly standing up to them. What they didn't know was that I had plans of my own. I've been quietly buying properties throughout the city, including several in Patricia's prestigious neighborhood. The mansion next door to hers had been on the market for months, and through a series of shell companies, I acquired it for $12 million. The annual family reunion was approaching, a 3-day affair where relatives from across the country gathered at Patricia's house. This year, however, would be different. "James, honey," Patricia announced at dinner a week before the reunion, "I've arranged the guest rooms. You'll stay in your old room, of course. Emma can use the basement. We need the good rooms for family who actually contribute to our gatherings." James shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, Emma's my wife. And as my daughter-in-law, she should be grateful for whatever accommodation she receives." Patricia cut in smoothly. "Besides, with her background, she's probably used to much worse." I simply smiled and said, "The basement will be fine, Patricia." If only she knew what was coming. The reunion began on a Friday. Cars filled Patricia's circular driveway as family members arrived. I helped carry luggage, serve drinks, and endured the usual snide comments about my background. That evening, as everyone settled into their luxurious guest rooms, I made my way to the basement with my small suitcase. The basement was cold and musty, with a narrow cot set up in the corner. As I sat on the creaking bed, I heard laughter floating down from above. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the vents. "Can you believe she actually took the basement without complaint? I told James he should have married Caroline. At least she knows how to carry herself in proper society." More laughter followed. I checked my phone. One new message from my property manager. "Everything is ready for tomorrow's inspection, Mrs. Miller. The mansion next door has been fully furnished according to your specifications." I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my back aching from the basement cot, and made my way upstairs. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as Patricia directed the catering staff for the day's brunch. "Oh, Emma. Good. Since you're up, make yourself useful and help Maria with the dishes," Patricia commanded, not even looking in my direction. "And do try to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. We have some very important people coming today." I caught James' eye as he entered the kitchen. He looked pained but remained silent, reaching for his coffee. The familiar sting of his passive acceptance made me straighten my shoulders. Just a few more hours. "Actually," I said calmly, checking my watch, "I have an appointment this morning." Patricia's head snapped up. "An appointment? During our family reunion? How incredibly rude." "Now, Mom," James began weakly, but Amanda cut him off as she swept into the kitchen. "Mother, the Hendersons just pulled up. You know, The ones who bought that gorgeous mansion next door. She smirked at me. They're my biggest clients this year. The sale was worth millions in commission. Patricia preened. Wonderful. Emma, before you leave for whatever menial task you have planned, at least make yourself useful and help serve the Moses. I smiled. I really must go. My real estate agent is waiting. Real estate agent? Amanda scoffed. What, are you looking at studio apartments in the bad part of town? The doorbell rang, and Patricia hurried to answer it, shooting me a warning look. I followed the group into the grand foyer, where a sophisticated woman in a sharp suit waited. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, she said, smiling directly at me. The mansion is ready for your final inspection. The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully crafted smile froze on her face. There must be some mistake, she said with a forced laugh. Emma isn't. Emma Miller, I confirmed, stepping forward. Owner of the mansion next door. Amanda's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible. I handled that sale. Through my shell corporation, yes, I said pleasantly. I believe your commission check was quite substantial. James stared at me, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Emma, what's going on? Perhaps we should all sit down, I suggested, gesturing to the living room. I have quite a story to tell. Once everyone was seated, Patricia and Amanda perched on the edge of their seats like birds ready to take flight. I began. 7 years ago, I developed a financial algorithm that sold for $75 million, I said calmly. Since then, my investments have multiplied that many times over. The mansion next door is just one of many properties I own. But you let us think, Patricia sputtered, that I was a cleaning lady's daughter who married above her station. I finished. Yes, I did. And you all showed me exactly who you are through how you treated someone you thought was beneath you. This is absurd. Amanda stood up, her face flushed. Mother, she's clearly lying. My real estate agent cleared her throat. I can assure you, Mrs. Henderson, that Mrs. Miller's credentials are impeccable. In fact, she owns controlling interest in the development company that built this entire neighborhood. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. The entire neighborhood. Including this house, I confirmed quietly. I bought it last month when it was technically still under your late husband's estate. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. James had sunk into his chair, his face a mask of shock and dawning realization. You mean? Patricia's voice trembled. This isn't my house anymore. It's mine, I said simply. Just like the basement where you made me sleep last night. Amanda jumped up. Mother, she can't do this. We'll fight it in court. You're welcome to try, I replied. My lawyers have ensured everything is perfectly legal. But right now, I'd like you both to leave my house. Leave, Patricia gasped. But where will I go? This is my home. Was your home, I corrected. Don't worry, I've arranged for temporary accommodations for you. There's a modest apartment available in the building where my parents used to work as janitors. I hear the basement unit is particularly cozy. The family gathering had devolved into chaos. Relatives whispered among themselves, some looking shocked, others secretly pleased to see Patricia's pride take such a fall. James finally found his voice. Emma, why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. I turned to face my husband. Would it have made a difference? Would you have stood up to your mother's treatment of me if you'd known I was wealthy? Because if money is what it takes to earn basic respect in this family, then we have bigger problems than where I sleep. The real estate agent cleared her throat. Mrs. Miller, shall we proceed with the inspection of your new property? Yes, I said, standing. Patricia, I'll have my staff help you pack. You have until tomorrow evening to vacate the premises. As I walked toward the door, Patricia's voice rang out, suddenly honeyed and pleading. Emma, dear, surely we can discuss this. We're family, after all. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. Family? Let's talk about family, Patricia. Last Christmas, you seated me at the children's table and told everyone it was because I wouldn't know how to behave at the adults' dinner. Last month, you accidentally excluded me from James' birthday celebration. And just yesterday, you made me sleep in a basement because you said I wasn't good enough for a real room. I didn't mean, she stammered. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You meant every slight, every insult, every attempt to humiliate me. You showed me exactly who you are, Patricia. Now I'm showing you exactly who I am. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the silent house as I walked out, head held high. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's sobs and Amanda's angry protests, but I didn't look back. The following weeks were a storm of activity and emotions. Patricia and Amanda moved out as required, though not without drama. They hired lawyers, of course, but as my legal team had predicted, every transaction was ironclad. I moved into the mansion next door, leaving James to decide his own path. The distance gave me time to think about our marriage and what it meant to build a life with someone who couldn't stand up for you. One evening, about a month after the revelation, my security team alerted me to a visitor. James stood at my front door, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I led him to my home office, a warm room filled with family photos, including one of my parents on their 30th anniversary. James' eyes fixed on it as he sat down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "About everything. About us. I've also been seeing a therapist." I waited, letting him find his words. "I failed you, Emma, not just at the reunion, but every time I let my mother treat you like you were beneath us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward." "Yes, you were," I agreed softly. He winced but continued. "The thing is, I kept wondering why you didn't tell me about your success. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving when Mom made that comment about your father being just a janitor, and I laughed. I actually laughed." Tears formed in his eyes. "That's when you were going to tell me, wasn't it?" I nodded. "I had the papers in my bag. But watching you laugh at your own father-in-law, I realized that you were just like them." "I was," he admitted. "And that shame is mine to carry. But Emma, I want you to know what's happened since you left." He straightened in his chair. "I resigned from my teaching position at Brighton Prep." This surprised me. James had taught at the prestigious private school for years. "I took a job at Riverside High School instead," he continued. "It's in the neighborhood where you grew up. The kids there, they remind me of you. Brilliant, determined, just needing someone to believe in them. And your mother? I haven't spoken to her since she moved out. She and Amanda have been trying to rally the family against you, but it backfired. Cousin Sarah came forward about how Mom had treated her when she married beneath her station. Then Uncle Robert shared stories about her behavior toward his second wife. It's like your courage in standing up to her gave others permission to speak their truth." I absorbed this information, noting the changes in James. He seemed more grounded, more present. "There's more," he said. "I've been volunteering at the community center where your mom used to work. Did you know they have a program teaching financial literacy to cleaning staff and janitors? I'm helping them expand it." "Why are you telling me all this, James?" "Because I want to earn back your respect," he said simply. "Not because you're wealthy, but because you're the same amazing woman who helped me grade papers until midnight and made soup when I was sick. I was too weak to deserve you before. I want to become someone who does." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. "Your mother's at the apartment building," I told James. "She's demanding to speak with me." "You don't have to go," he said quickly. "Actually, I think I do." I found Patricia in the basement apartment where she now lived. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her designer clothes looked out of place against the concrete walls. "Hello, Patricia." She turned, and I was struck by how different she looked. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, showing the insecure woman beneath. "Emma," she said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Finally, she whispered, "I understand now." "Understand what?" "What it feels like, to be judged by where you live. To have people look down on you." Her hands trembled. "Yesterday, I couldn't get a restaurant reservation because of my new address. I've been going there for 20 years. Feels awful, doesn't it?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I've been horrible. Not just to you, but to so many people. Living here, being treated the way I treated others, it's opened my eyes." "That was the point," I said quietly. She looked up sharply. "You mean, this wasn't just revenge? Revenge would have been making you homeless. This was about education." Patricia sank onto the small sofa. "I've lost everything. My home, my social standing, my son." "You haven't lost James," I corrected. "He's choosing to be his own man for the first time. Whether you lose him permanently depends on whether you can accept that change." "And you?" she asked hesitantly. "Have I lost you as a daughter-in-law?" I studied her carefully. That depends on you too, Patricia. Real change takes more than a few weeks of humility. Will you help me? She asked softly. I don't mean financially. I mean help me learn to be better. It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party. Patricia was there, wearing a simple dress rather than her usual designer labels. She helped in the kitchen not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. Amanda came too, having recently started volunteering at a women's shelter, a requirement I'd added to her lease when she asked to rent one of my properties. James and I were still working on our marriage, taking things day by day. He'd proven his commitment to change not through grand gestures, but through consistent actions and unwavering support. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table. My parents were there, my father deep in conversation with James about the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more community centers. My mother and Patricia were exchanging recipes, their previous class barriers dissolved. Emma, Patricia said during dessert, I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me that true worth isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about how you treat people. She smiled sadly. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner. Later that night, as James and I stood on our balcony overlooking the neighborhood, he asked, Do you regret any of it? I thought about the past year, the pain, the growth, the transformations. No, I said finally. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. He took my hand, and we stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The basement apartment where Patricia lived was visible from our vantage point, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. My phone buzzed. A message from my investment team about another successful algorithm deployment. But for once, I didn't check it immediately. Some things were more valuable than money, and I was finally surrounded by people who understood that truth. I grew up enchanted by the magic my grandmother created in her tiny kitchen. Each morning, the warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries would weave through our modest apartment, drawing neighbors like moths to a flame. Her hands, weathered yet masterful, could transform the simplest ingredients into creations that brought joy to everyone lucky enough to taste them. Remember this, Emma, she'd often say, kneading dough with rhythmic precision. Good food isn't just about taste. It's about creating memories. Her words stayed with me long after she passed away, leaving behind a well-loved recipe book filled with her handwritten notes and secrets. I was 16 at the time, but I knew then what I wanted my life to be. 10 years later, I had graduated from culinary school and spent countless hours honing my craft in various bakeries. Every paycheck went straight into my dream fund, inching me closer to opening my own bakery. The journey wasn't easy. Double shifts left my feet aching, my hands raw. But I never wavered. I had a vision. That's when I met James. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and he walked into the bakery where I worked, seeking refuge from the downpour. His damp suit and askew tie gave him a disheveled charm, but it was his smile that lit up the room. Whatever smells so good, I'll take 2, he said, running a hand through his wet hair. I had just pulled my signature lavender honey croissants from the oven. You're in luck, I said, placing one on a plate. First one's on the house. He took a bite, his eyes widening in delight. This is amazing. Please tell me you're not married. I laughed at his boldness. Is that your way of asking me out? Only if it's working, he replied with a grin. It was. James was unlike anyone I'd ever met, kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my dreams. When I told him about my plans to open my own bakery, he didn't dismiss them as far-fetched like others had. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions and offered encouragement. Our relationship blossomed quickly. 6 months later, we were discussing marriage. That's when I met his family, and everything changed. Patricia Chen, James's mother, was the embodiment of old money and high society. Her perfectly styled hair, designer wardrobe, and air of superiority made me feel out of place from the start. As the property manager of Crystal Mall, one of the city's most prestigious shopping centers, she wielded her status like a weapon. So, she began during our first dinner together, sipping her wine. You're a baker? Yes, I said eagerly, determined not to let her rattle me. I've been saving to open my own bakery. She laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the room. Oh, darling. Do you know how many small businesses fail in their first year, especially now? James, surely you can help her find something more realistic? James squeezed my hand under the table. Mom, Emma is incredibly talented. She knows what she's doing. Of course she does, Patricia replied, her smile dripping with condescension. But wouldn't you rather have a wife who can attend charity galas and board meetings? Someone who fits our world? Her words stung, but I didn't respond. James's father, Robert, quickly changed the subject. A tactic I later learned was his go-to for avoiding confrontation. Despite Patricia's disdain, James and I married 6 months later in a small ceremony. It was far from the grand affair Patricia had envisioned, and she made her disappointment known at every turn. At the same time, I was quietly working toward my bakery dream. A chance meeting with Marcus Sterling, a prominent real estate developer, changed everything. Impressed with my business plan and vision, Marcus offered to invest in my bakery, providing the capital to launch not just a small shop, but a high-end bakery and cafe concept with room to grow. What neither James nor Patricia knew was that Marcus owned Crystal Mall, where Patricia worked. When my application for a space crossed her desk, she dismissed it out of hand. A bakery? Here, she scoffed. This is a luxury mall, not some roadside stand. What she didn't know was that Marcus had already approved my tenancy. Her rejection was merely a formality. 2 weeks later, construction began on Sweet Heritage in the heart of Crystal Mall. Patricia's fury was palpable when she discovered her veto had been overruled, but there was nothing she could do. On the eve of the grand opening, she stopped by, her expression a mix of disdain and smugness. When this fails, and it will fail, don't expect James to pick up the pieces, she said, her tone cold. I smiled, holding back the truth. Thank you for your concern, Patricia. Care for a coffee? We're testing the machines. The next morning, Sweet Heritage opened its doors to a crowd of eager customers. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air, and the elegant decor showcased the perfect blend of tradition and modernity. By noon, we had sold out, and glowing reviews from food critics began pouring in. Patricia's disapproval was no match for the bakery's success. But as she stormed off that morning, unaware of Marcus's involvement, I couldn't help but feel a small victory. This wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about proving myself right. And as I stood in my dream space, my grandmother's worn recipe book tucked into my apron pocket, I knew this was only the beginning. The situation reached a boiling point at the mall's monthly tenant meeting. Patricia had scheduled it during our busiest morning hours, forcing me to choose between overseeing the breakfast rush or attending. Reluctantly, I sent Sarah to manage the shop and went to the meeting. As you can see from these charts, Patricia was saying as I slipped into a seat, foot traffic in the north wing has become problematic. Certain establishments, she paused, her eyes locking on me, air causing congestion that disrupts our more established tenants. The boutique owner next door spoke up immediately. Actually, since Sweet Heritage opened, our sales are up 30%. Their customers shop while they wait for their orders. A ripple of agreement ran through the room. Patricia's face tightened. Well, she tried again. There have been complaints about odors. You mean the smell of fresh bread? Someone interrupted with a chuckle. It's fantastic. My customers say it makes the whole mall feel cozier. And what about Patricia? Marcus's calm but firm voice cut her off. Sitting at the back, the mall's owner had been silently observing. I think we've heard enough. Sweet Heritage has exceeded expectations and boosted mall traffic. Perhaps we should focus on more pressing concerns. Patricia sat down abruptly, her lips pressed thin. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. I don't know how you fooled everyone, she hissed, but this won't last. You're not good enough for this mall, or for my son. Mom, James's voice startled her. He'd arrived to meet me for lunch. Patricia immediately softened. James, darling. I was just expressing concern about the stress Emma must be under, running a business like this. Surely you prefer her to have more time for family. The only stress I feel, I said evenly, comes from your constant interference. How dare you? Patricia snapped. I'm only thinking of my son's happiness. No, James interjected, his tone sharp. You're thinking of yourself. Emma has built something incredible. Why can't you just support her? Patricia's eyes glistened with well-timed tears. I see she's turned you against me. What kind of woman drives a wedge between a mother and her son? The kind who's transforming your entire mall, Marcus said, approaching Patricia, my office. Now, we watched them walk away. James shook his head. I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't know she was being this awful. It's not your fault, I said, though a part of me wished he'd seen it sooner. Before I could say more, Sarah rushed up, breathless. Emma, the food critic's review is live. The review was everything we'd hoped for, glowing praise for our innovative recipes, warm atmosphere, and excellent service. By evening, our shop was busier than ever, with new customers and even a few well-known food bloggers. Patricia didn't show up at the mall for several days. Gossip hinted at lengthy meetings with Marcus. I kept quiet, waiting for the right moment. That moment came Sunday evening at a family dinner Patricia insisted on hosting. To discuss some changes, she said cryptically. The meal was tense. Patricia picked at her food while Robert made awkward small talk. Finally, she cleared her throat. There have been developments at work, she began. James frowned. What's going on? Mr. Sterling is making organizational changes, she said, her voice tight. He's bringing in a new property manager, someone with fresh perspectives. What? James exclaimed. But you've managed Crystal Mall for years. Apparently, Patricia said bitterly, someone has convinced him otherwise. Someone, saw potential for something better, I said softly. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean? Robert asked. I took a steadying breath. Before I opened Sweet Heritage, I met Marcus at a seminar. He saw potential in my ideas, not just for a bakery, but for modernizing retail spaces. Patricia let out a sharp laugh. You? A baker with grand ideas? Yes, I said, sliding a folder across the table. These are proposals I've worked on with Marcus for over a year. Ideas for transforming Crystal Mall into a modern destination. James opened the folder, his eyes widening. Community spaces, seasonal festivals. Emma, this is amazing. Ridiculous, Patricia scoffed. Marcus would never. I already have, Marcus said, stepping into the room. Patricia's face drained of color. Mr. Sterling. I didn't. Emma owns 51% of Sterling Retail Properties Mall division, including Crystal Mall, Marcus announced. The room erupted. Patricia looked stunned. Robert choked on his wine. It's impossible. Patricia sputtered. Emma has raised mall revenues by 40% in 1 year, Marcus said. Her strategies are reshaping retail. Patricia whispered. Are you taking my job? No, I said firmly. You're being promoted. Regional Operations Director for our expansion. Assuming, I added, you can work professionally with me. Patricia's shock slowly gave way to grudging acceptance. I may have misjudged you. You definitely did, I replied. The question is, what will you do now? As we left, James squeezed my hand. I should have stood up for you sooner. Yes, I said, smiling. But what matters is what comes next. As we drove home, a quiet reflection settled over me. Patricia had been humbled, but questions lingered in my mind. Could her newfound acceptance of me endure beyond the reach of circumstance? Would it mean more or less, because it had been spurred by necessity rather than genuine change? The next day heralded fresh challenges. News of the management shifts swept through the mall, transforming my daily interactions. Some employees greeted me with respect, others with nervous glances that hinted at their fears about the future. Yet beneath the surface, there was a growing energy, the buzz of something new and promising taking shape. Patricia, meanwhile, had taken a week to process the upheaval. When she returned, it was with a surprising fervor for the new initiatives, though her motivation seemed more about proving herself to Marcus than embracing the vision. Still, it was progress. 3 weeks later, she appeared at Sweet Heritage before dawn. Her usually immaculate posture was softened by uncertainty, and her designer handbag seemed more like a shield than an accessory. We need to talk, she said simply. I was wrist-deep in croissant dough, but gestured toward my office. 5 minutes. She waited silently, observing as I finished the delicate laminating process. By the time we sat across from each other, the tension had thickened. Her eyes wandered over the shelves in my office, pausing on my grandmother's recipe book. I've been reviewing the expansion plans, she began, her tone uncharacteristically measured. The demographic data for the suburban locations is impressive. I nodded. Thank you. I stayed silent, waiting for her to say what she had really come to say. Her fingers worried at the pearls around her neck. Finally, she spoke, her voice wavering. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear her out. When James introduced you to us, I was prejudiced. I saw someone I believed didn't belong. Someone I thought would hold my son back. I couldn't have been more wrong. Her candor caught me off guard, but I simply asked, and now? Now, I see someone with vision and character, someone who took every opportunity to retaliate against me and chose grace instead. You've built something extraordinary, and I misjudged you completely. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And what changed your mind? You did, she said softly. Your actions, your resilience. And this place, it's more than a bakery, isn't it? It's a living, breathing example of what retail can become. That's the idea, I replied. Retail isn't just about transactions anymore. It's about creating connections and experiences, about telling stories. Her gaze drifted to the recipe book again. The morning buns, she said, almost to herself. Yes. They remind me of the ones my grandmother used to make. I lost her recipe years ago. I stood and retrieved the book from the shelf. Would you like to see how they're made? Her eyes widened, tears gathering at the corners. You'd share that with me. Family recipes are meant to be shared, I said. If we're going to make this work, we need to start there. That morning, Patricia Chen donned an apron in the Sweet Heritage kitchen for the first time. Her initial attempts at morning buns were far from perfect, uneven filling, lopsided shapes. But when she bit into her first creation, her smile was unguarded and genuine. Over the weeks that followed, Patricia's early morning baking sessions became a regular sight. The tenants, initially shocked, began to embrace the idea. Our professional relationship grew, and so slowly did our personal one. Months later, at the grand opening of Sweet Heritage's second location, Patricia was teaching her friends from the country club how to make croissants. Marcus, watching the scene, nudged me with a grin. Never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I replied honestly. The expansion flourished, with 5 new locations opening within a year. Each one reflected the heart of the original Sweet Heritage while embracing Patricia's operational expertise. The morning buns, now a signature item, became the subject of endless speculation among food bloggers. One evening, as we closed the flagship store, Patricia lingered. Emma, I've been thinking about your community initiative, she said. Oh, what if we expanded it? Cooking classes, maybe, teaching people how to create their own family traditions. I smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. Her hug was unexpected but warm. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me. As I drove home, I reflected on how life's sweetest triumphs often lie in the connections we forge. Success wasn't just about building a thriving business or proving others wrong. It was about honoring my grandmother's legacy and helping others, even those who resisted, grow. The next morning, Patricia was already at Sweet Heritage when I arrived. I was thinking, she said, her apron dusted with flour. Maybe we could create a special pastry for James and your anniversary, something that tells your story. Our story, I corrected gently, the bitter and the sweet. She smiled, understanding. Yes, all of it. As we worked side by side in the warm glow of the rising sun, the scent of fresh possibilities filled the air. It wasn't just a new beginning for the bakery or the mall. It was a new beginning for us all. I never intended to hide my success. Growing up in a modest Boston family, I learned early on that humility and perseverance mattered more than status. My father, a mechanic, would return home with grease-stained hands and a weary smile, while my mother worked back-to-back shifts as a nurse, determined to put me through college. Emily, she'd often say, success isn't measured by what you own, it's defined by who you are. Her words stayed with me. By 23, I had started a tech consulting firm in my garage. 2 years later, it had grown into MTech Solutions, now worth over $200 million. Yet, I kept a low profile, preferring the quiet satisfaction of working behind the scenes. Then I met Michael. Our paths crossed at a neighborhood coffee shop. I was absorbed in reviewing contracts, dressed in my usual jeans and sweater, when he accidentally knocked over my coffee. Oh no, I'm so sorry, he exclaimed, fumbling to save my papers. I couldn't help but laugh. It's fine, I reassured him. even though those documents were acquisition agreements worth millions. His genuine panic was oddly charming. "Let me make it up to you," he insisted. "I'm Michael, by the way." "Emily," I said, smiling. "And sure, I'll take you up on that coffee." That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a relationship. Michael was unlike anyone I'd ever met, kind, down to earth, and a high school teacher who genuinely loved his job. He never asked about my wealth, mainly because he didn't know about it. I told him I worked as an executive assistant at MTech Solutions. It wasn't entirely untrue. I did oversee administrative tasks, though as the company's owner, not an assistant. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. Things were perfect until I met his mother, Victoria. Victoria Patterson was the picture of social ambition. Her home was filled with imitation designer goods, and her conversations revolved around imaginary connections to high society. From the start, she disapproved of me. "A secretary?" she asked during our first dinner, her tone sharp. "Michael, darling, wasn't there a surgeon's daughter I introduced you to?" "Mom," Michael said, clearly annoyed, but she pressed on. "I just think, given our family status, you should aim higher. The Pattersons have always married well." The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael had already shared the truth of their middle-class life, propped up by credit card debt and appearances. "I like my job," I replied simply. "It's fulfilling." Victoria sniffed dismissively. "Well, someone has to do those things, I suppose." Her passive-aggressive remarks became a fixture of family gatherings. At Christmas, while others received thoughtful gifts, I got a plain office planner. "For keeping your boss's schedule," she said with a smirk. Michael often apologized privately but never confronted her outright. I understood. Family dynamics can be tricky. Then came the announcement that changed everything. One Sunday dinner, Victoria stormed into the room, brandishing a newspaper. "MTech Solutions is looking for a new CEO. This is my chance." I nearly choked on my wine. While it was true we were seeking a CEO, the search was highly selective. "You're applying?" Michael asked, visibly surprised. "Of course. After 20 years in middle management, it's time I moved into the big leagues," she declared, turning to me. "Emily, put in a good word for me, would you? Though I doubt your recommendation carries much weight." I maintained a neutral expression. "I'll see what I can do." "Don't bother," she said with a wave. "I've already called in favors. The board will be impressed by my credentials." Little did she know, I was the board. The following week, Victoria arrived at MTech Solutions for her interview, dressed in an over-the-top suit. I watched from my private office as she loudly proclaimed her qualifications in the lobby. "Mrs. Patterson," my assistant called. "The board is ready for you." Victoria straightened her posture and marched into the conference room. She froze the moment she saw me seated at the head of the table, flanked by board members. "Emily," she sputtered. "What are you doing here?" "Running my company," I said evenly. "Please have a seat." Her face paled as the realization hit. This can't be. "It is," one board member confirmed. "Ms. Walker is our founder and majority shareholder." Victoria's carefully curated facade began to crumble. She stumbled into a chair as I opened her application file. "Let's discuss your qualifications," I said, my tone all business. Her resume was riddled with embellishments, and I questioned each one. Her fabricated achievements and supposed connections unraveled quickly under scrutiny. "I think we're done here," I concluded. "Your application is disqualified due to misrepresentation." "You can't do this," she cried. "This is personal." "No, it's professional," I replied. "But since you brought up personal matters, yes, I've endured your insults and condescension for months. This isn't revenge, Victoria. It's accountability." She stormed out, muttering threats about exposing me to Michael. "Go ahead," I thought, already reaching for my phone. It was time Michael knew the truth. "Mom just called me crying," Michael said as he walked into my office, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "She said you're her boss? Emily, what's going on?" I motioned for him to sit down, taking a deep breath. "Michael, there's a lot I need to explain. I wasn't completely honest about who I am. I didn't want to complicate things between us, but now it's unavoidable. Can I show you something?" Minutes later, Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office, his eyes scanning the breathtaking view of the city and the nameplate on my desk. Emily Walker, founder and CEO. He turned to the wall of awards and newspaper articles featuring my company, MTech Solutions. So, you're not a secretary, he said, his voice measured. No, I'm not, I admitted, standing beside him. I founded MTech when I was 23. The company your mom mocked me for working at? I built it from the ground up. He looked at me, hurt flashing in his eyes. Why would you hide something like this? Why lie? I wanted someone to see me, not my bank account, I said. Do you know how many people have tried to get close to me because of my money or status? I wanted to experience love for who I am, not for what I own. Michael sighed, his expression softening. I understand that, but you let my mother treat you horribly. You could have stopped this months ago. And what would that have accomplished? I asked. Proving her obsession with status, right? That wealth is what defines someone's value. I didn't want to play her game. Michael ran a hand through his hair. You're right. I should have defended you. I failed you there. Before I could respond, the office door burst open, and Victoria stormed in, dragging her husband George behind her. Her face was red with fury. There she is, the liar, the manipulator, she screeched. George, ever the quiet observer, stepped forward. Emily, this feels inappropriate. Using your position to reject Victoria over personal disagreements. I recorded the entire interview, I said, cutting him off. With the press of a button, Victoria's stumbling responses played over the speaker. This wasn't personal. Your wife lied on her application and misrepresented her qualifications. The board made their decision based on facts. Victoria's face twisted with rage. You think you've won? Just wait until everyone hears about this. The so-called genius CEO who pretended to be a secretary just to trick her way into our family. Mom, stop. Michael's voice thundered, silencing the room. Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You're humiliating all of us. Humiliating? She's the liar here. Victoria spat. No, Michael said firmly. Emily lied about one thing, her job. You've lied about everything else. Our family status, your connections, your accomplishments. It's all been a facade, and I'm done enabling it. Victoria's mouth fell open, and George placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go, Victoria, he murmured. This has gone too far. This isn't over, she hissed as he led her out. You'll regret this, both of you. As the doors slammed behind them, silence filled the office. Michael turned to me, his face weary but resolute. I'm sorry for everything my family's put you through, but I need to know, where do we go from here? Before I could answer, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Patterson is in the lobby, causing a scene. Security is asking how to proceed. Michael and I exchanged a look. We handle it together, he said. I pressed the intercom, send security footage to my laptop and stand by. Only intervene if she disrupts operations. On the screen, we watched Victoria pacing the lobby, stopping employees to rant about me. Most ignored her, some rolling their eyes. But then she pulled out her phone. She's stealing clients, Victoria shouted, waving the phone in the air. I have proof right here, financial documents from Patterson Insurance. My blood ran cold. Those are confidential. How did she get them? Michael's face paled. She works in middle management at Patterson. She must have accessed the files. I was already dialing. Mr. Patterson, this is Emily Walker. Your employee, Victoria Patterson, is in my lobby threatening to expose confidential client information. Yes, I'll hold. Victoria's voice blared over the feed. I'll ruin her. She's been poaching our best clients. A sharp voice cut through the chaos on the screen. Victoria Patterson. A poised woman in a suit approached, flanked by two men. I'm Susan Chen, legal counsel for Patterson Insurance. You're hereby suspended pending investigation for violation of your non-disclosure agreement and attempted corporate espionage. Victoria stumbled back. No, you don't understand. We understand perfectly, Susan said coldly. Your access to confidential files has been monitored for weeks. This public outburst only confirmed our suspicions. Michael watched in stunned silence as his mother was escorted away, her protests growing fainter. He turned to me. Emily, I didn't know she was capable of this. It's not your fault, I said gently, but we need to address this openly, with your family, with mine, and with ourselves. Michael nodded, his voice steady. together. As security led a stunned Victoria out of the building, Michael turned to me, his brow furrowed. You knew about her job performance? I found out during the merger discussions, I admitted. I planned to help her transition into a role better suited to her skills. That's part of why I kept my identity hidden. I needed to fully understand the situation before making decisions that would impact your family. Mr. Patterson, standing nearby, shook his head with a faint smile. Always thinking of others, Emily. It's one of the reasons I agreed to the merger in the first place. He straightened his jacket and added, Don't worry about Victoria. We'll handle the legal aspects with discretion for Michael's sake. After he left, silence settled in the office. Michael sat across from me, staring out the window, lost in thought. I need some time, he said at last. This is a lot. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Take all the time you need. At the door, he paused, looking back at me. For what it's worth, I fell in love with Emily the secretary. Knowing you're Emily the CEO doesn't change that. It just means I have more to learn about you. After he left, I remained at my desk, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. My phone buzzed. A message from George, Michael's father. Victoria's home, devastated. She knows what she's lost. When you're ready, we should talk. All of us. Family shouldn't end like this. The week that followed, I buried myself in work, giving Michael and his family the space they needed. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of Victoria's public meltdown. Corporate espionage involving two merging companies was too scandalous to ignore. Fortunately, both companies' PR teams managed to keep the damage under control. One late evening, as I was reviewing merger documents, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, the Patterson family is here to see you. They entered together, George leading with calm authority, Michael, his expression unreadable, and finally Victoria, her usual confidence replaced by a tentative, vulnerable air. She wore simple business attire, a stark contrast to her usual designer wardrobe. Emily, George began, his tone measured. We need to talk. All of us. Victoria stepped forward, wringing her hands. I've been in therapy this past week, intensive sessions. Losing the promotion, it broke me. Everything I built my identity around, my importance, my connections, it all crumbled. You tried to hold on by grabbing more, I said quietly. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. When I saw the CEO posting, I convinced myself I deserved it, that everyone else had been holding me back. Then learning the truth about you, it shattered what little I had left. Mom, Michael said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, there's more you need to tell her. Victoria took a shaky breath. I've struggled for years. Shopping addiction, fabricating stories about our family's status. It all started when George's business hit trouble a decade ago. Instead of facing reality, I created a fantasy. It felt easier than admitting we weren't who I pretended us to be. George spoke up, his voice heavy with regret. And I enabled it. I thought keeping up appearances would keep us afloat. But it only made things worse. The merger, is it still happening? I nodded. Yes. Victoria's actions hurt both companies, but they don't erase 2 decades of service. The merger includes a retirement package for long-term employees. It's hers if she wants it. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. After everything I've done, everyone deserves a second chance, I said. But there are conditions. Continued therapy, working with HR on a transition plan, and most importantly, honesty with yourself and others. Victoria broke down, her carefully constructed walls finally crumbling. I'm sorry, Emily, for everything. For how I treated you, the things I said. Michael moved to my side and took my hand. We've all learned something, he said. Mom about honesty, Dad about enabling, me about standing up for what's right, and Emily about trusting people with the truth, I finished, moving forward. 2 months later, Victoria retired quietly. The merger proceeded smoothly, and she found new purpose volunteering at a financial literacy program, helping others avoid the mistakes she'd made. At our wedding the following spring, she gave a heartfelt speech that left few dry eyes. A year ago, I thought status and appearances were everything, but my daughter-in-law taught me that true worth lies in how you treat others. Emily, thank you for giving our family a second chance, not because you're a CEO, but because you're a compassionate human being. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. We had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth, moving past lies and pretenses. Looking around, I saw our merged family. George chatting with my father about business, Victoria helping my mother arrange flowers, our employees meeting with relatives. Success, I realized, meant nothing without people to share it with. Happy, Michael whispered. Very, I replied with a grin. Though I do miss that secretary desk sometimes. He laughed. Well, you did say your assistant's going on maternity leave. Don't tempt me, I teased. I might just go undercover again. Victoria overheard and joined our laughter, genuine this time, free from pretense. She'd found something far more valuable than status. Peace with who she truly was. As the celebration continued, I thought back to that first accidental coffee spill. It had led to this moment, proving that sometimes life's biggest blessings come disguised as chaos. Looking around at the people I loved, I knew success wasn't measured in dollars or titles. It was measured in second chances, hard truths, and the courage to be authentically yourself. I never intended to hide my success. Life has an uncanny way of revealing people's true colors when they believe you have nothing to offer. My name is Emma Chin, and I've always known that appearances can deceive. Growing up in a modest apartment above my parents' tiny grocery store in San Francisco's Chinatown, I watched them pour their lives into 14-hour workdays just to ensure there was food on our table and a chance for me to succeed. Their lessons shaped me. True worth isn't measured by wealth, but by character and determination. Emma, mai tin du shaiksin dijihui, my mother would say every morning as she straightened my collar, her hands worn from labor but tender as silk. Each day is a new opportunity. While my peers were playing video games or watching TV, I was helping stock shelves, learning inventory management, and poring over accounting books. My father's old calculator became my toy, and numbers my steadfast companion. But beyond the math, I absorbed the ethos of their work. Respect every customer, no matter what they could afford. Treat everyone like family, my father would say. You never know their story. Their sacrifices bore fruit when I earned a full scholarship to Stanford's business school. The day I received my acceptance letter, my mother cried, and my father closed the store early for the first time in 2 decades. We celebrated with a feast of dumplings and my mother's special red bean soup. At Stanford, I worked relentlessly, channeling the grit my parents had instilled in me. Between classes, I developed an innovative supply chain management system that caught the eye of Genesis Tech, a rising Silicon Valley powerhouse. Your algorithm could transform global distribution. Marcus Sterling, their CEO, said during my final presentation, "We'd love for you to join us after graduation." The offer was beyond anything I'd imagined, a senior position with significant stock options. But I surprised Marcus by requesting to start in operations instead, learning the business from the ground up, just like I had in my parents' store. Most people want to start at the top, Marcus remarked, his curiosity piqued. I want to earn it, I replied. How can I lead if I don't understand the foundations? Impressed, he agreed. Officially, I was Senior Vice President of Operations, but few colleagues knew my true title, a secret I preferred. That's how I met James. One rainy Tuesday morning in the company cafeteria, I was immersed in inventory reports when someone jostled my table, nearly spilling my coffee. Oh no, I'm so sorry. A tall man with kind eyes and a crooked tie scrambled to steady the cup. I swear, I'm usually more coordinated. Laughing, I replied, no harm done. I'm Emma. James Wilson. His warm smile tugged at something in me. Let me make it up to you. Coffee's on me. One coffee led to lunch, then dinner, and soon we were inseparable. James worked in marketing, his creative flair complementing my analytical nature. He loved hearing about my work in operations, always curious about my day. You don't just see problems, he said one evening as we strolled along the bay. You see solutions. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't until we began planning the wedding that I encountered his mother, Victoria Wilson. Our first meeting took place in their Pacific Heights mansion, a monument to old money. Victoria greeted me from atop a marble staircase, her demeanor icy. So, she began surveying me through designer glasses. You work in operations? She practically spat the word. Yes, I said evenly, offering no further explanation. And your parents? They own a grocery store in Chinatown. Small business owners, she murmured, exchanging a look with her husband. Well, everyone has to start somewhere. James squeezed my hand but said nothing. A red flag I chose to ignore. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, Victoria's subtle digs and overt meddling became routine. She dismissed my preferences as charmingly simple and insisted on orchestrating everything. Darling, she'd say, patting my hand as if consoling a child. Leave it to those who understand these things. Even my wedding dress, a modern design with traditional Chinese accents, became a point of contention. But dear at the street Francis, wouldn't you prefer something more appropriate? This is appropriate, I replied firmly. It honors both cultures. She pursed her lips. Well, I suppose it's your decision. Though James's first girlfriend, Caroline, always had such elegant taste. European, you know. James, yet again, said nothing. Despite Victoria's interference, the wedding was beautiful. My parents sat in the front row, tears glistening in their eyes. Meanwhile, Victoria held court, regaling her bridge club with tales of James' accomplished cousins. Of course, not everyone marries up, I overheard her say, her tone dripping with disdain. Post-wedding life didn't ease the tension. Monthly family dinners became tests of patience as Victoria's barbs continued. Emma, dear, could you help the housekeeper clear the table? You must feel more at home in the kitchen. Or, James, Caroline just made partner at her law firm. Isn't it inspiring when people reach their full potential? By Christmas, Victoria announced a grand holiday dinner, emphasizing, everyone who matters will be there. Everyone who matters? I echoed. Yes, well, you understand. Family. James stared into his wine glass, silent as always. What Victoria didn't know was that her Christmas dinner would unravel her assumptions in ways she could never predict. But that's a story for another time. We arrived at the Wilson mansion at exactly 6 o'clock. True to form, Victoria had spared no expense. Thousands of twinkling white lights adorned the 3-story facade, and an enormous wreath with a gold bow graced the front door. Through the frosted windows, I glimpsed a dining room that looked like a luxury magazine spread, complete with towering floral arrangements and gleaming crystal. James, Emma, Victoria greeted us, her smile just as polished and cold as the silverware inside. She wore an elegant designer gown, undoubtedly more expensive than what she imagined I earned in a year. James, darling, everyone's gathered in the living room. Emma, perhaps you could lend a hand in the kitchen with the appetizers. Mom, James began, but I touched his arm lightly. It's fine, I said, my voice calm. Victoria's lips curled in a smug smile. So considerate. That's what we love about her, isn't it, James? Always willing to pitch in. James offered a weak laugh and followed her into the living room, leaving me alone in the hallway. In the kitchen, I found Maria, the Wilsons' housekeeper of 15 years, commanding a small team with the precision of a general. When she spotted me, her warm smile reached her eyes. Mrs. Emma, what are you doing in here? You're a guest. Apparently not, I replied with a wry smile. Still, I rolled up my sleeves and began helping her arrange the smoked salmon canapes. The doorbell chimed again, followed by Victoria's delighted exclamations as more guests arrived. Among the voices, one stood out, Caroline. Of course, James' ex-girlfriend had somehow found her way onto the guest list. When it was time for dinner, Maria and I carried the appetizers into the formal dining room. The sight that greeted me was as grand as I'd imagined. A massive table set for 24, each place adorned with Waterford crystal and antique silver. Name cards, written in Victoria's flowing calligraphy, marked every seat. I walked the perimeter of the table, scanning for my name. It wasn't there. Oh, Emma, Victoria's voice rang out, syrupy with fox concern. We're just a bit tight on space at the main table. I'm sure you understand. Family comes first. Why don't you join Maria in the kitchen? You two seem to get along so well. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me, some curious, others uncomfortable. Caroline's smirk was barely concealed behind her champagne glass. James's father, Richard, cleared his throat. Perhaps we can fit another chair. Nonsense, Victoria interrupted smoothly. Emma understands. She's used to more casual settings. My cheeks burned, but I forced a neutral expression. Years of handling tough negotiations had taught me the value of composure. Of course, Victoria, whatever makes you comfortable. As I turned to leave, I caught James's gaze. He looked uneasy but said nothing. Something inside me hardened. Back in the kitchen, Maria wrung her hands. Mrs. Emma, this isn't right. Let me speak to Mrs. Wilson. It's fine, I said, pulling out my phone and sending a quick text. I sat at the small kitchen table and opened my laptop. At least let me fix you a plate, Maria insisted. Thank you, Maria, but I have some urgent work to handle. Major supply chain issue. I offered a reassuring smile as I reviewed the data Marcus had sent. The problems in Asia were more severe than I'd hoped, but not insurmountable. From the dining room came the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Victoria's voice floated above the rest, recounting tales from James's childhood. Caroline chimed in with anecdotes from their high school days. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The doorbell rang again. Maria moved to answer it, but I stopped her. That's for me. I opened the door to find Marcus Sterling, CEO of Genesis Tech, standing in his signature tailored suit, a look of mild concern on his face. Emma, he greeted me warmly. Apologies for intruding on your Christmas dinner, but we need your input on the Asia situation. Of course, I said, gesturing for him to come in. Though technically, I'm not at the dinner table. His brow furrowed. Not at the table? Why not? Why don't we find out together? We walked into the dining room, where the hum of conversation stopped abruptly. 24 heads swiveled toward us, curiosity and confusion etched on their faces. Victoria stood quickly, her expression hard to read. I'm so sorry, sir. The help isn't supposed to let visitors in unannounced. Emma, you should know better. Marcus blinked, then turned to me. Help? I'm confused. Why is my senior vice president of operations eating in the kitchen? The silence was deafening. Victoria's face drained of color. Senior. Vice president? Yes, Marcus said, oblivious to, or perhaps enjoying, the tension. Emma's leadership has been pivotal to Genesis Tech's success. Her supply chain system is groundbreaking. Surely her husband has mentioned her accomplishments. All eyes turned to James, who looked like he might faint. I didn't know, he stammered. You never asked, I said quietly. Caroline's champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. But you work in operations, Victoria sputtered. You said. I do, I replied, my tone calm. As the senior vice president, I chose to start at the ground level, just as my parents did in their modest grocery store. Marcus nodded approvingly. Speaking of which, Emma, your mother's dumplings are extraordinary. The board loved them at our last meeting. Victoria collapsed into her chair, her shock plain. Board meetings? Yes. Marcus continued. Emma's one of our youngest board members. Her stock options alone are worth. Marcus, I interjected gently. Perhaps we should handle the Asia situation elsewhere. I wouldn't want to disrupt the family dinner. I turned to Victoria, my gaze steady. Thank you for making my place in this family so abundantly clear. It's helped me make some important decisions. Emma, wait, James said, finally standing. We need to talk about this. We do, I agreed. But not tonight. Tonight, I have a company to run. As I left, I paused. Oh, and Victoria, those dumplings you dismissed last month, they were a hit at our last gala, $200 per plate, quite the success with the governor. Marcus and I walked out into the crisp night air. As we approached his car, he glanced at me. I've been wondering how long you'd let them treat you like that. I smiled faintly. Sometimes it's better to let people show you who they really are. And James, that's a decision for another day. As the car pulled away, my phone buzzed relentlessly with messages. From James, from Richard, even one from Caroline. But the one from Victoria stood out. Emma, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I turned off my phone. Asia needed my attention, and my life needed a fresh perspective. As my mother always said, each day is a new opportunity, and tonight, I'd seized mine. The next morning, I woke up in my private office at Genesis Tech, the resolution to the Asia crisis neatly tucked away in my outbox. A late-night video conference with our Shanghai partners and decisive action had steered the company away from disaster. As sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Mrs. Chen. Sarah, my assistant, peeked in. Your husband is in the lobby. Again. This is his third attempt since dawn. I sighed and glanced at my phone. 47 missed calls, 93 texts, and an avalanche of emails. Victoria alone had sent 28 increasingly frantic messages. Send him up, Sarah. It's time we talked. When James walked in, he looked nothing like his usual polished self. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and his tie was nowhere to be seen. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the sleek office, the awards on the walls, and the panoramic view of the bay. Emma, he began, his voice hesitant. This is really your office. For the past 2 years, I replied, motioning for him to sit. Not that you ever asked. He sank into one of the visitor chairs, his gaze dropping. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what, that I'm more than the girl your mother looks down on. That I've built a career while you stood by and said nothing. When exactly was I supposed to do that, James? In between your mother's jabs or your silence? He winced. Mom's difficult. Difficult? I repeated, crossing my arms. She made me eat in the kitchen on Christmas, and you let her. I was going to say something. But you didn't. You never do. My voice was calm but firm. 2 years, James. 2 years of watching you laugh at your mother's jokes about my background. 2 years of staying silent while she paraded Caroline in front of me. 2 years of you being ashamed of me, or at least of what you thought I was. I wasn't ashamed, he protested. Weren't you? Then why didn't you ever ask about my work? Why didn't you visit me here? Why didn't you defend me? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. The board approved your Asia strategy, he said. Stocks up 12% already. Excellent work. Thank you, Marcus. I'll finalize the timeline today. When I hung up, James stared at me, his face pale. You report directly to Marcus Sterling. I have for years, I said, my tone matter of fact. Remember last Christmas when I missed your mother's party because of overtime? I was in Tokyo, finalizing a $1 billion deal, but you assumed I was working a shift at a warehouse. Emma, I didn't know, he pleaded. Please, give me another chance. I shook my head. That's the problem, James. Now that you know I'm successful, you want to make things right. What about when you thought I was just a grocery store girl? Didn't I deserve respect then? The silence between us was deafening, and in it, I found my answer. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah appeared again, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Wilson is here. She's insistent. I nodded. Sent her in. Victoria swept in, dressed impeccably as always, though her usual composure was absent. Her eyes flitted around the room, widening as they landed on my credentials and accolades. Emma, darling, she began, her voice sticky sweet. We need to clear up this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I arched an eyebrow. You mean where you made me eat in the kitchen, or where you've spent 2 years treating me like I was beneath you? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't know who you were. And that, I said sharply, is the root of the problem. You judge me based on my parents' grocery store. Tell me, Victoria, how much do you think Genesis Tech paid for my supply chain system? She blinked, floundering. I don't. $300 million. Before I even graduated. That modest store taught me everything about respect and hard work. Concepts you still haven't grasped. Emma, James interjected. People can change. Give us a chance to make this right. I opened my laptop, revealing an email from my lawyer. 2 years, James. I've given you plenty of chances. I met his gaze. I'm filing for divorce. Victoria gasped. You can't. Think of James's future. I am, and mine. I stood. The prenup you insisted on. It protects my assets as much as his, and the Pacific Heights mansion. I bought it last year. Check the property records. James sank back, stunned. All this time, while you let your mother belittle me, I was building something real. I pressed a button on my desk. Sarah, please escort Mrs. Wilson out. James, you have until Friday to move your things to your parents' house. Emma, think of what people will say, Victoria exclaimed as security arrived. They'll say what I should have said years ago. Respect isn't earned by a bank account. It's earned by treating people with dignity. I turned to James. Your mother spent 2 years trying to make me feel small. She only succeeded in showing me how small she is. As they left, I stood by the window, watching the fog roll over the bay. A text from my mother appeared on my phone. Mai tan du shaik sin deji hui. Each day is a new opportunity. Smiling, I drafted a press release about Genesis Tech's triumph. The stock would close at a record high that day. But my true success wasn't in the numbers. It was in knowing I'd reclaimed my self-worth. 6 months later, I closed another quarterly report. The divorce was final, the house sold, and Victoria had a new cautionary tale for her bridge club. None of it mattered anymore. Sarah knocked. "Mrs. Chen, your parents are here for lunch." I closed my laptop smiling. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And the best revenge? It's not served cold in a kitchen. It's served in a corner office, surrounded by those who saw your worth all along.